Welcome to Orca Watch Live with Robin Petch.
Good evening, everyone. Lovely to have you with us for another Orca Watch Live. Had a very interesting day yesterday, which you'll hear a little bit more about very shortly. But let's have a quick look ahead to the rest of this week with Orca Watch Live. And tomorrow, of course, we have our Orca Photo ID special. The team behind the Scottish Killer Whale Identification Catalogue will be here to talk about that, and we'll be playing a pre-recorded meeting between some of that team. Lots of other events during the week, all of them, of course, available as a free link on Eventbrite. Looking ahead to tonight, then, as I said, a very interesting show we have indeed. I'll have a look at yesterday's sightings briefly in a moment or two, and we'll be meeting Emma Neave-Webb and Hugh Harrop to talk about some of those encounters from yesterday. I'll follow that up with a look at the birth of Orca Research with Michael Bigg and his team over in Vancouver Island. And we'll have a quick look ahead to tomorrow, including a weather forecast. We will be, we will be answering questions as well this evening, we hope. But first, we need to have some. So if you can use the chat on YouTube that you can see on your screen, or email us at orcawatchonline2021@gmail.com. We have a team of people here ready to answer some of those questions at the end of the show. So keep those questions coming in. Okay, let's have a quick look then, shall we, at what has been around over the last day. And yesterday turned out to be a very, very interesting day indeed, as you will find out in just a moment or two. We had sightings right from the beginning of the day of Risso's dolphins, and a very exciting encounter with orca in Shetland, which very shortly Hugh Harrop will talk to us about. I'm not going to dwell on that one at the moment, because that's a very exciting encounter. We're also joined tonight by Emma Neave-Webb from OMMRI. As you can see there on Orkney, we had a number of sightings there of different species, which Emma is going to come and talk to us about. And in other parts of the world too, common dolphins and grey seals, as you see there on Duncansby Head. So I think we have Emma on the line. Are you there, Emma? Oh, yes, she is. But tell us, first of all, how you got involved with whale and dolphin research generally.
Oh, I was lucky enough to get involved back in 2003 with marine life. I actually travelled on the Pride of Bilbao going down to started volunteering with them and ended up working for them. So yeah, it's all come from there really.
Yeah, and you've moved on and we now have OMMRI. So just tell us a little bit about OMMRI.
Well, OMMRI, much easier to say than the Orkney Marine Mammal Research Initiative. We decided to use every word in the dictionary possible. Basically, we're a little local charity that we founded in July last year to try and plug the gap in knowledge up here. There's loads of anecdotal evidence that the waters around Orkney are really important for cetaceans, but nobody's ever really looked into it properly. So there's three of us got together to found OMMRI with the view to basically doing some scientific data collection up here so that we can start to understand a lot more about what's happening and hopefully protect it for the future.
Excellent. So you obviously live there.
I do, yes. I'm very lucky. I live on the second most northerly island, Sandy.
Oh, wonderful. Well, a big thank you as well for being our coordinator, Sea-Watch Foundation.
No problem.
Regional coordinator there as well, of course. So lots of hats to wear.
Absolutely.
Yes, so on to yesterday anyway. We've got two species seen, common dolphin and Risso's dolphin. Tell us all about it.
Well, we spent the weekend enveloped in really thick haar, like most of the area up here, which was really disappointing. But it cleared yesterday morning, and our first sighting was 5 Risso's dolphin quite early on over in Westray, Sandy's near neighbour, and then it went a bit quiet. There was 3 common dolphin off of Marwick Head heading north from West Mainland, and then we had another at least 2 Risso's dolphin, possibly 3, that was seen off of Scapa Pier down near Quirkwell in Scapa Flow. I think they hung around there for about an hour and then were last seen heading south towards Hoxha Head. So after 2 days of fog, we finally got some sightings, which was fabulous. I will admit now I didn't see any of them because unfortunately I was watching from the ferry on the way home, having spent the weekend in town, and we didn't see anything.
Oh no, that's always the way, isn't it?
Always the way.
Well, it's a good job you take your cuddly orca with you anyway. So,
absolutely. Always guaranteed to see. I'll try that again. Always guaranteed to see one.
Yep. I gather common dolphins are becoming, well, more akin to their name, I understand, round Orkney at the moment.
They are, yes. I've been up here 6 years now, and they were pretty rare. We would get maybe 1 or 2 sightings a year when we first got here, and they were considered very, very rare. Definitely becoming much more common now. We are recording them pretty much all year round. They seem quite happy here. We've had a couple of strandings of animals getting caught out in tidal areas up here on Sandy that we've managed to get back out. But yeah, they're definitely becoming more common. There's definite change with their distribution and their abundance around Orkney.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of work to be done with that one, because although we don't usually see them down here in Yorkshire, I know there have been the odd sightings, and it's more common even down where we are, and off the Northumberland coast and the East Scottish coast. So there's definitely seems to be a shift in their movements, doesn't there?
Definitely, yeah. I mean, it's great that we're getting them all year round. We're going to be looking at our historic data as well as future data that we gather to see if there's any habitat preference, whether they're here for a particular food or whether they're just going to hang around all year. It's really exciting to think what we're going to find out.
So, well, I mean, as we've said right from the beginning of the week, this might be Orca Watch Week, but we are also fascinated by any other cetacean species, and common and rissos, very exciting too.
Yes, and always love the little harbour porpoise as well, not to leave them out.
Absolutely, they really get overlooked, and they have a tough life, the poor little fellas.
Yeah, they're our most common cetacean in Orkney, but they're hugely, hugely under-recorded. So just putting a plea out there, if you do see any, please do let us know.
Yeah, don't overlook the harbour porpoise. I think that should, we ought to have a harbour porpoise week, I think.
Oh, we should.
Emma, thank you very much for joining us.
No problem. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for all of your work. Okay, well, as we said at the head of the programme, we have some breaking news, and we had the wonderful encounter with the 12s group yesterday, and we have Hugh Harrop with us to talk about this exciting sighting. Are we there, Hugh? Can we see you, and do we have sound?
Yeah, good evening from Shetland. How are you?
Hello. Very good, thank you. That was a very, very nice sighting yesterday, I know. Very exciting.
Absolutely. I mean, it's any orca sighting is exhilarating, and this one was a very special one, which we'll get to in a little while. And we haven't really been plagued by the weather as Orkney and Duncansby has. Locally, we have, myself and Karen Hall will pay testament to that. But yesterday was 16 degrees and glorious sunshine when we were watching orcas, and a very, very strong wind. So, but a lovely day, hence the colour of my skin. No sunblock, so bad.
Well, we have a very nice little map just to set the scene, really, for people to have a look at. So we can just talk briefly about that before you go into your presentation. There we go. That's the map. And you talk us through that briefly, Hugh, if you would, please.
Yeah, sure. Well, for those of you that aren't familiar with Shetland, the big lump of land there in the sort of major right of your of the map is the island of Yell, and the big lump of land to the southeast of that, southwest of that, I should say, is the mainland of Shetland, and we are surrounded pretty much wherever you go in Shetland. We're an archipelago, so lots of seawater. And one of the staggering things about orca watching in Shetland is the distance which we are tracking these orca traveling, and the duration that we are able to keep eyes on orcas. This map, kindly put together today by the Sea-Watch coordinator here, Karen Hall, who many of you will be familiar with, shows just what a long day it was, really, that with regards to the distance. You're looking at about 70 kilometres of travel of these orcas yesterday, starting off at the top of the map there. That's where they were first picked up at 10:45 in the morning. And I think, at North Row, if you can see where they end up, that was about 6:30 in the evening. So imagine cycling or walking. That's hard enough driving it, actually. It was a long day for us yesterday. But basically the pods came through Blue Mole Sound, which is the area of water between Fetler, Yell and Unst, came down the east coast of Yell. We picked them up in Yell Sound at the southern tip of Yell, thinking that they were going to continue on their southern trajectory. They came into an area of water where what we regard to as a sort of an exit point, where we've always got 2 attempts to see them going in and then 1 attempt going back. And lo and behold, they gave us the slip and suddenly appeared back in Yell Sound. So it was a mad dash then all the way to get back to the sort of the coastal strip of the North Mainland, where we were picking them up from various headlands and points north. So it was a mammoth effort, really, on behalf of everybody that was out and updating, sightings in our local sort of group and things. And special thanks as well to Karen, who was updating things when some of us were out of phone signal, etc. So a huge amount of area covered yesterday by these orcas and indeed orca watchers. I've prepared a few sort of slides here that we sort of put together more so to give an idea of how we piece together the movements of the animals and indeed the eventual identification of the animals, and just to give a sort of virtual sort of tour of what was happening. So we got the news at about 10:45, and you'll see from the first slide here we were kindly sent some images from, as a Canon user, this slide absolutely drives me mad because it's got Nikon plastered all over it, but there you go, this friendly rivalry. So if there's anybody listening from Canon UK tonight, then please note that I am a Canon user. But this brilliant back of camera, or box shot as we call, came from one of the local fishermen here called Ryan Nisbet. And Ryan is a long-term advocate and a really, not only is a lovely guy, he's a really good guy to know, because he spends most of his life on the water. And the news provision that we get from Ryan and indeed many of his colleagues around Shetland is second to none. And while everybody thinks that all the sort of orca sightings are down to Karen and myself and all the other sort of names that you may have heard from Shetland, far from it. Most of our sightings are coming from members of the public and people out there doing their job. So Ryan was at sea when these animals were seen initially, and a couple of land-based observers picked them up as well. So Ryan was obviously stopped fishing at that stage and started taking photographs, and you'll see many of his photographs in the Scottish Orca catalogue as well. So he's a very proficient photographer, and I was getting these images by WhatsApp, thinking, okay, who we got? The first news that went out was it's a pod with 2 males. So you immediately think, okay, it's possibly the 27s, but can we get some imagery? So this was the first slide that came through, and then the second slide that Ryan sent me, thought, oops, okay, hang on a minute, this isn't the 27s. And from that image there, being the nerd that I am, I was pretty sure that had to be the 12s pod. Now, the 12s pod is, as many of your listeners will know, we are naming these pods after the matriarch and the number of the animal that the number that we've given the animal within the Scottish Orca identification catalogue. Now, 12 isn't in that picture, but some of the 160, 161 and 162 are, and that's probably Tilly, one of the calves in the front there as well. So that was a case of, right, okay, like that famous Clash song, do I stay or do I go? And then when I got this picture come through on WhatsApp, is like, right, okay, drop everything, turn everything off and jump in the car. This is a very, very diagnostic female. This is 12. She has this double notch on the trailing edge of her dorsal fin, and she is the matriarch of the 12 pods. Now, they're a Scottish-Icelandic pod. We know very little of this pod, other than they have been identified in Iceland and ultimately here in Scotland, but there are only a handful of Scottish records. The last time they were seen in Shetland waters was 2018, and they were seen in Orkney as recently as last month. So she is a very, very distinctive animal here. And you can see from the slide that we prepared for the Scottish ID catalogue, if we move on to the next slide, then you can see there she is in all her glory. You look at that right-hand dorsal fin profile, hasn't changed much at all, and very, very obvious whether it's a left side view or a right side view. And of course, there's the post oculars or the eye patches that we've inserted into the catalogue there as well. So throughout the day, we were tracking with them. We were joined by a number of fellow orcaholics, one of which was Sharon Jack. Sharon kindly provided us today with some images, which you'll see now on the next slide. Those of you that follow Shetland Orca Sightings and indeed Orca Watch on Facebook will be familiar with Sharon's name. Wherever there's orcas, you'll see and meet Sharon. She's a brilliant advocate for cetacean watching in Shetland, as indeed is her husband Steve. Both staunch supporters of conservation and very, very competent photographers as well. So that's one of the balls in the pod. And indeed, if we move on to the next slide, we'll see the three animals here. What we're noticing in the 12s pod is that we probably got a younger animal from the catalogue that is an emerging male. So as you will find out tomorrow in the chat that we've done about the Orca ID catalogue, everything is evolving. Everything changes from 1 minute to the next. As soon as we produce the catalogue, it becomes out of date. And all the images that we are getting in from members of the public or taking ourselves are adding to this this sort of wave of information that we're so fortunate to get. So Ryan has kindly given us permission just to show a few of his pictures here. So if we move on to the next slide, we'll see that on the left we've got the matriarch animal 12. You can see that double notch if you put your eyes close to your TVs or your screens, and you can see that we've got animal 160 here on the right. That is identifiable by the eye patch it's quite obvious to me, and if you look in the catalogue as well, you can see that the shape, particularly at the anterior edge of that, matches that. And this is where eye patches are very, very valuable tools for us at the moment, because we can't see all of that male's dorsal fin. From experience and from knowledge, I could probably much, and so could the other authors of the Orca ID catalogue, but if you were to see that and refer to the catalogue, then we would refer you to the post oculars or the eye patch to try and identify that animal yourself, because all the post oculars are unique. They're asymmetrical, but they are unique, and that's why we've included them. So the animals did make a kill. On the next slide, you'll see that wherever there's a close gathering like this with gulls around, at this point they were on a kill. It wasn't clear what species they killed, whether it was a harbour porpoise or a common or a grey seal. But moving on to the next slide, what Ryan did was secure some really, really nice imagery. Again, a fantastic eye patch there, for potential use in further editions of the catalogue. And this next slide, I'm really, really tempted to sort of say, hey, do me a canvas, because that just typifies everything about orcas as far as I'm concerned. That's one of the most dramatic pictures I think I've ever seen of an orca taken in Shetland waters. And trust me, there's been a few. So absolute knockout shot. And then we think that's good. And then he produces the next piece of work of an orca coming right towards him, as you'll see in the next slide here as well. So that was all very good, and these images, we were all taking photographs and having a great time yesterday evening. I got back and started looking through the images of the day, just trying to put faces to names, etc. And then Ryan kindly sent me more of his images later on. And this next slide sort of, I was ready to go to bed at that stage and relax. And this next slide sort of really stopped me in my tracks. It's a lovely picture. It obviously shows a calf here on the right. But something just didn't seem right about that calf. We know of the existence of a calf within the 12s. That's a calf called Tilly that was born back in 2016. And the next slide will show a photograph of Tilly there in the middle, very, very small, and a very distinctive eye patch. Again, we have to identify calves by the eye patch. The dorsal fin is obviously evolving, and the grey saddle isn't particularly grey, and any minor scars there are soon sort of grown out, if you like, just with the skin expanding and indeed stretching. So I should have gone to bed, but no, I just had to start looking through images and Ryan's and comparing images. And so what we did is go to the catalogue, which you can see on the next slide. And this, we started, I say we, it was me, but comparing eye patches. And we didn't have a lot of choice of eye patches of Tilly because there's such a rarely seen pod, not just here in Shetland, but also in Western Iceland. So ironically, we probably got the best images here in Shetland of this particular animal, even better than what is in Iceland. And this is where the networking between us sort of orcaholics is working out pretty good. Now, from the left eye patch there, the bottom left image, you can see that those eye patches don't match, but it's always good to sort of really go into detail and start looking at things. So from the next slide, what I did was really blow Ryan's image up, and I needed to compare this post-ocular with the post-ocular of Tilly. So from the next slide, you can see we don't need AI, we don't need anything fancy, just a good old Apple Mac, and basically put the pictures side by side and let the human eye decide which is which. And as I'm sure, if there is anybody watching this that disagrees, then please shout, because this is a significant moment within the history of the 12s pod. But hopefully you will all agree that the calf at the top is Tilly, and that animal is now just under 5 years of age. That was born in 2016. And the animal at the bottom there that was photographed is indeed a new calf. So that's really exciting news. That comes off the back of obviously the new calf with the 169s pod, the new calf that is obviously 170 is the mother. So within a few weeks, we've got two calves in Scottish waters. I strongly suspect the 169s are on Icelandic pod, even though they've never been recorded in Iceland, but I suspect they're not far off there. So great news, really, to round off what was an amazing day. And any day watching orcas is always a great day, but to round it off with being able to prove that. The interesting thing is we didn't even see this animal in the field. We were aware that there was a smaller animal in the pod. They were fast moving. The sea state was pretty tough going, but yeah, it's just really nice. And the twist to all of this, from a personal perspective, is there's often warfare, for use of a better word, between conservationists, environmentalists, and fishing boats and fishermen. And here we have a guy that basically lives on the water, out feeding his family, doing his job as an inshore fisherman, contributing not only to the sort of Scottish Orca ID catalogue, but also contributing to Icelandic projects. So huge thanks to Ryan, not only for taking that photograph, which has changed our knowledge of the 12s, but also for us, allowing us to document that with his absolutely amazing photographs. So we'll just go back to that slide, the next slide now, just to really enjoy the animal on the right there. We haven't obviously given the calf a number yet. We won't give this calf a number until probably 2023, when we'll be looking at updating the 2021 catalogue. But I suspect it's over a year old. Many of you will know that the really young calves are very ochre, very orange coloured, but this seems to have lost most of that pigmentation. And I suspect that that's around about 1.5, possibly as old as 2 years. But it doesn't surprise me, because they are such a poorly known pod, certainly in Scottish waters. We haven't seen them here in Shetland in 2018. And that pod, That animal was almost certainly with the 12s when they were in Orkney. But again, it just goes to show what can happen within an encounter that can get missed. And that's why it's important that every pod take as many photographs as you can, try and visit and chase every orca pod that you possibly can, because you're always going to learn something, and you might just strike gold in a moment like this. So again, huge thanks to Ryan, and indeed everybody for updating the local Grapevine and Facebook groups yesterday. Without that help, none of this would be possible. So
yeah, absolutely.
A big round of applause.
Yeah. Fantastic. I'll pick up on a couple of things that you said. I mean, first, I really do want to echo what you said about fishermen. They do get an awfully bad press, and we know there are some issues around the massive scale fishing industry that's really damaging for cetaceans. But you are absolutely right. All over this country, all over the world, there are so many fishermen contributing to research into all kinds of orca species and other aspects of conservation. And local fishermen on the small scale really do need a big shout and really need our support, I think. And the other thing really is what you said about volunteers and observers and the partnership working and all of that. Orca Watch is all about bringing everybody together in that way. But what people need to understand is that behind the scenes, that sort of work is going on all the time. That, you know, you are partnering with the people in Iceland, who, of course, we had Philippa with us on Saturday for our evening of talks. And just the cooperation and collaboration between all the groups and all the volunteers and everything. We couldn't do, none of us could do what we do without masses and masses and masses of volunteers out there.
Yeah, I would echo that and completely agree. And in tomorrow's interview, the pre-record, you know, you'll see just the sort of the tribute that we pay to people without their involvement or help. Then the Orca ID catalogue, as it stands at the moment, would not have been possible. You know, citizen science is such a powerful outfit at the moment, and it's important that these relationships, you know, are really just strengthened, reinforced, and continue for the benefit of not just cetaceans but ecosystems certainly across the globe.
Yeah. Hugh, thank you so much for being with us this evening. I know you can't be with us tomorrow because you've got an important event on. We will see you on screen. But any questions that we have for you, we'll save up and hopefully have you back on later in the week.
Welcome. Thank you very much for having me, and have a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for being here. Okay, let's just have a quick look ahead to that. That's tomorrow night. Wonderful chat between these people all about that photo identification catalogue. And as we say, some of the team will be available afterwards to ask questions. It's answer questions. Sorry, it's an extended Orca Watch Live, an Orca Watch Live special tomorrow. Still free like all of them. So I do hope you'll join us for that one. Should be an absolutely fascinating evening. Okay, let's go quickly back to the rest of our sightings today, or rather yesterday. And so there is the we saw Hugh there talking about the sightings around Shetland. Is my presentation coming? There we go, it is. Excellent. Just as I was saying. So this one wasn't on the sightings that I shared with you, but Catherine de Bertrand is another of our volunteers, another of those vital people. And she's travelling all the way up to Scotland. She was in Gairloch yesterday and managed to get a sighting within 5 minutes of sitting down in that lovely spot. And not sure whether they were bottlenose or white-beaked dolphins. She sees a lot of bottlenose dolphins down south where she lives. But they've been entered into the catalogue as being species unknown. It's most likely from the group size that they were white beaks, but they could have been bottlenose, so they go in as an unknown. Because they have beaks, we know that they're not rissos. Because of the size and the grey colour, we know that they weren't common. But she had such a lovely day there, and those of you who are up there in the north of Scotland will see Catherine in the next few days when she gets up there. Just as a quick shout out at this point for the app, which we've mentioned before, Catherine's recording all of her sightings on the recording app. It's available for iOS or Android. And as well as being able to submit sightings, there are video guides, species pack of information in there, so you can submit sightings wherever you are. The GPS in your phone or tablet will record that. You can learn more about all of the animals that we see, 35 different species that we can see in Northern Europe, 30 around the UK, and study those to learn more about them, even watch videos and look back at all of your sightings. Okay, just a quick reminder about our website and the sightings pages. We've been looking mainly at the breaking news sightings page over the last day or two. We do have a verified sightings page as well. And just earlier today, just for interest, I had a quick look at southwest Scotland and the Inner Hebrides, in the area where Catherine is at the moment. As I haven't got her sightings recorded yet. So we had harbour porpoise and minke whale in that part of the world, and more harbour porpoise, rissos and common dolphins again, and a minke whale around northwest and the Outer Hebrides. So do keep checking on the website, because all of the latest news is always recorded there first. Okay, moving on. Let me just double check that we've got everything done there. Yes, we have. So it's time for me to move on and share with you my presentation for the evening, which ties in nicely with some of the things that we were just hearing there. And just click on this. I can't multitask as well as I would like sometimes, so I'm just clicking this to share it, ready to go. Ties in very nicely. I did do a talk on Saturday which touched on the work of Dr. Michael Bigg, and I wanted just to spend a few minutes before we meet everyone tomorrow and talk about the ID catalogue to just look a little bit more at the legacy of this man's work and the colleagues that he worked with, which have been so important to everything we now know about orca. Unfortunately, Michael is no longer with us. He died in 1990 of leukemia. But before Michael Bigg, I think it's fair to say, there wasn't Orca Research. In fact, there was barely whale research at all. Any research that went on was basically of dead animals. It was a byproduct of the whaling industry. And a few orca had been captured around Vancouver Island at this point, and fishermen also were killing the orca. They were shooting orca because they felt that they were taking their fish. They were very concerned about the declining fish stocks. So, as with any population, the Canadian Department of Fisheries and Oceans realised that they were going to have to do a census to see if the killing of orca and the taking of them for the dolphinarium industry was going to be sustainable. He had nothing to go on. He was appointed to the job, but had to make the rules up as he went along, and so decided that the easiest way to create the census, was to send a questionnaire out. 15,000 questionnaires went to all sorts of people, local boat owners and fishermen and anybody who would respond. And once the survey was in, it was pretty clear that there were probably only around 350 of these animals around the area, not the thousands that had always been believed. So as a result of that work, and also work being done in America because there were orca off the Washington coast, they realized that taking orca and killing orca on that scale was not actually sustainable. And fortunately, because of that, from 1976, there were no further whales taken in that part of the world. Few have been captured elsewhere in the world since, but none around there. But it was very clear to Michael Bigg and his colleagues that this was not an easy way of gathering the information. It was the only way they had, but they were casting around for alternative ways of doing it. And they noticed this whale Stubbs. Stubbs became A1, the first female at the top of the matriline. At this point, though, when they first started the work, there was a general assumption that these great big tough males were the leaders of the pods, these giant animals with the huge fins, and the others around them were younger ones and a kind of harem of females that followed the males around. One of the things that Michael Bigg and his colleagues began to realize through their studies was actually this was not the case at all. It was a matrilineal society, and it was the females that led the pods. The males were hanging with the females. Now you see with the Scottish catalogue, both sides of the fins are being taken, and now also the saddle patch and the eye patch. At this stage, initially, it was the fin and the saddle patch. In the case of Stubbs, a very well-marked animal, clearly you could identify that one. But the photo ID set techniques proved that actually, if you looked very hard at the nicks, the scratches, the patches, you could see individuals in all of the whales. You could actually tell them apart. Now, the work carried on for some years, but once this census was completed and a few more studies had been done, as far as the government and the agency were concerned, the work was over. So Michael Bigg was reassigned, but he was not daunted, carried on the work in his own time. He would often even ignore what his managers were telling him to do, and even during his own working day, he would be out there meeting with fishermen, getting on boats, doing the photo ID work. He'd enlisted Dr. Graham Ellis by then as well, and soon John Ford, Ken Balcombe, other marine biologists, photographers, and then, much as we have around us today, hundreds of volunteers joined in this fascinating work, learning more about this population of orca. And suddenly, we could actually count them. We didn't have to estimate the populations, and we could then study their travel patterns. We could look at relationships. We could look at the birth of calves and deaths and changes in the family and how the pods interacted with each other. Before this, none of that was possible. So everything we're doing today is down to that work. And here, much younger years are from the left, Graham Ellis, John Ford, and Michael Bigg. I often think of them as the original A team, although Ken Balcombe is missing from that. But everything we know about orca and everything really, much of the development of whale research generally started with these people. Of course, there were others around the world. And one of them is our very own Dr. Peter Evans, who's has communicated with, talked to, and actually met these people in the earlier years, because they were believing the same thing. It was possible to study wild whales and dolphins, not just captive ones and not just dead ones. So Graham Ellis has retired now, 2015. At least he's retired from the Canadian Department of Fisheries and Oceans, but he's still very much involved. He's not the lead name on the catalogue anymore, but he's very much involved in orca research in the area. And you can see the wonderful cake they made for him on board the research ship. As he said himself, and I mentioned a few minutes ago, he quoted as saying, "It had become so fascinating we couldn't let it go. For many years it was done with our own money and our own time." And in so many ways, that has not changed. Like myself, a lot of the people that you've been meeting involved in this work are volunteers, and often it's funded at least partly through our own pockets. We do it because we love it. We do it because we care about the animals. The volunteers, as we've said, are absolutely vital to this work. This is John Ford with his Soundtrap hydrophone. And I talked about Moby Doll in the previous presentation, and it was actually seeing Moby Doll that got John Ford so fascinated in the subject. He became a graduate student with Michael Bigg and has been involved ever since, and actually has only just fairly quite recently retired as head of cetacean research. So from such humble beginnings, you never know where it might take you. And Ford and Ellis have worked together not just on the resident community, but here we have their book on the transient community too. And with Ken Balcombe, the original catalogue was published as a book. I have the original and second edition of the killer whale catalogue. It's now produced as a full-on catalogue with a huge team of researchers behind it. But those three names feature heavily in the history of that orca catalogue. This is Ken, very well-known researcher involved with humpback whales as well as orca and much, much more. He was right there at the beginning with those pioneering work in photo identification, founded Orca Survey and then the non-profit Centre for Whale Research, which leads the study of the southern resident community in particular. Also been involved in blackfish amongst other things, but damned to extinction is looking at something else we've talked about this week, which is the decline in the Chinook salmon that those orca are so dependent on. And it's the study that he and others are doing in that part of the world that has made them realise that although theoretically orca can change their prey species and adapt and move on, so far the southern residents seem to have proved unable to do so, and leading to a decline in that population, as we've mentioned in the previous talks. This is the latest graph that I have anyway. There are probably more recent ones now showing that decline in the JK and L pods of that southern resident community. And PCB and chemical pollution, boat traffic, and that Chinook prey depletion that we talked about. So Michael Bigg's legacy, well, part of his legacy is the amazing team that he built around him. Those people are still involved, and of course they too have had their own students who are now part of this research work. We learned that not only were there resident whales that ate mainly fish, and transient, or now often called Bigg's killer whales, that eat mainly marine mammals, there were the offshore killer whales, and that's a newer addition to the study. And they are predominantly fish eating, but those fishing seem to include sharks. And they've discovered that their teeth are a little worn down, which may be because of the skin of the sharks being so rough, of course. As we know, we can use the fins with the identification. This is A72 notch from that very first A1 pod with the original matriarch of stubs, now that A30 matriline. And those techniques, as we know, are now used by researchers around the world. A Bigg's killer whale having just made a kill of a seal, something that we're seeing around us now in Scotland. Part of his legacy is the very knowledge that there are these different types of orca, what we're currently calling ecotypes. And those ecotypes, of course, include the two types of orca that live in the North Atlantic and visit Scotland, Shetland, Orkney, the whales that we are here to find out about as part of Orca Watch. Some that eat mainly herring and mackerel, at least initially, but now increasingly we realise they take seals too, and the type 2s that mainly eat marine mammals. And so tomorrow we will learn much more about the Scottish killer whale catalogue, because some of the authors of that catalogue will be with us, and some of them will be there to talk to us at the end and answer questions. Karen Hall, Steve Trulock will also be here. Hugh can't be with us, but you will see him in the film, and Karen Munro, those contributors to that catalogue. So I hope you will join us tomorrow for that Orca Watch special, all about the Scottish killer whale catalogue. Okay, I'll just check my running order now and see what I'm about to move on to. And we're going to have a little look at sightings from today. If I just bring my other slideshow back. Now, I won't use a slideshow for that actually, because we have very, very few. We're running a little bit late and we've got very few. So I'll skip the slides, save those for tomorrow. Today's been a very quiet day, so we may not have a lot of other things to talk about tomorrow, so I will save these. But at the time of preparing for this presentation this evening, we only had 2 sightings. There may have been more now that have been added, so have a check on those sightings lists on the website. But at 12:43 we had a minke whale spotted at Strathy Point by Joe Scaife and Tim Hawes. And at 14:25 Joy Marshall, who was on the Jog ferry, the John O'Groats ferry, spotted a Risso's dolphin milling around about 200 metres east of the harbour. That was something she actually saw from the ferry. So just 2 sightings so far from today, but we will see. There may be more that we can talk about tomorrow, but we'll certainly look at those in a little bit more detail. Let's also have a look ahead tomorrow to the weather. Let's see what we can expect to have around us. And I'll use my pointer on the screen again. I'm assuming you can see my pointer, but I'm using it to help myself. So if you look at the wind scale at the bottom, you've got knots of wind, and obviously the lighter the wind, the better. Stronger wind means more waves, makes it harder to see the animals. We prefer wind of 10 knots or less, ideally. That takes us up to force 3. And as you can see, throughout the main areas that we are working, we've got winds which I would say, looking at that, are probably in about the 15 mile an hour rate, the 15 knot range, sorry. So pushing in some places, probably the green's fairly dark, pushing towards even maybe 20 knots. So it might be a little bit choppy to see things at a distance. A little bit more sheltered, in fact, quite a lot more sheltered around the Hebrides area. So hopefully sightings there should continue. Okay, let's have a look at the next slide and the visibility tomorrow. Hopefully mostly going to be okay. There's no sign of any nasty purple or red areas on the map, so that's got to be good news. Moving on. And the swell we talked about, this is the gap between the bottom of the swell area and the top of it. We like to have something very, very light, so the very pale blue is the best areas for swell. We've got some fairly moderate swell to the west of the islands and along most of the coast. Duncansby looks reasonably light. So Duncansby, Morayfirth area and all around the Hebrides, fairly light swell. Moderate to even slightly heavier swell, but I'd say mainly moderate swell probably to the west. So yeah, not too bad tomorrow, hopefully. Fingers crossed. Okay, well, we said we would try and answer any questions that we could, and we have got a few minutes, so I'm just looking through now. I've got to see if I can find any questions that might have been forwarded and see if there's any we can deal with. Here we go. We've got quite a few have been pushed towards me, so let's have a look. So Fiona Williams, does the Sea-Watch Foundation partner or share information with the WDC or Orca organisations? Yes, we do, and vice versa. In fact, all of the organisations and groups do share information and quite freely with each other. Sea-Watch holds a large national, what is in effect the national database catalogue. So a lot of people submit information to that, but we share information and work closely with these partners. In fact, a lot of the people that you are meeting during Orca Watch are from those other organisations as well. So yeah, data sharing, they're great supporters, particularly during National Whale and Dolphin Watch. But throughout, I would add to that throughout the year. Let's have a look. Another one from Fiona. If the orcas that frequent Iceland and the Shetlands, Orkney Islands, also visit the Faroe Islands, are they at risk from the infamous grind hunting? That would be truly concerning. And Emma has answered that one for us. Thank you, Emma. You met Emma Neave-Webb earlier from OMMRI. Historically, there was an orca grind back in the 1980s. She thinks it was, but we can check that, but we think so. And there is footage of that on YouTube. It clearly an animal as powerful as an orca. It did not go well, and it was very, very dangerous. And certainly in recent years, that has not taken place. It's pilot whales and white-sided dolphins predominantly that are taken in the grind in the Faroes. I think there would be such an outcry. Yes, actually, Emma agrees. There would be such an outcry. And the Faroes too, like everywhere else, there is a growing interest in watching cetaceans and people wanting to set up whale and dolphin watching businesses around the Faroes. So we are all hoping very much that change is on the way. There are lots of campaigns with Sea Shepherd, for example, notably campaigning to change that. But actually, quite often, change comes because of people's changing attitudes. And around the world, it's actually whale watching that has been one of the most positive changes, which has helped to see an end to whaling. Of course, it hasn't finished everywhere yet, but even in those countries such as Norway and Iceland, where it is still happening, it's very, very much declined, and there is a lot of pressure for it to end. So fingers crossed, same in the Faroes. But the short answer is probably now there would be no effort to try and kill orca in the Faroes. Stuart Baxter asks, what causes the orange pigmentation with newborn calves? And our sightings officer, Chiara, has answered this. Diatoms, which are tiny microorganisms, and it depends very much on water temperature. And yep, quite right, it is not only orca that you can see this on. Lots of other cetaceans, in fact other animals, can have that those creatures growing and living on them. So bottlenose dolphins, white-beaked dolphins, Chiara gives the examples of that you can also see that on. And of course, that orangey pigmentation with the newborn calves, we've seen that with some of the orca in Antarctica, for example. The type B animals that we showed in the earlier slideshows have those same diatoms on, and that's even with adult animals. They have that same sort of coloration. Question from Hilary Marsden. In the images before the chat started, there was an orca with a substantial chunk out of its fin. In fact, we have the question on screen. Excellent. Has there ever been an orca that had the fin bitten right off? If it happened, would an orca survive? And Karen is on standby to answer this one for us. So Karen, if you are with us, there is Karen.
Yeah, so an interesting question. I mean, quite a lot, if you look through the catalogue, there's quite a lot of orca with notches and bits and pieces out their fins, particularly number 55 and number 89. And also what tends to happen with, not just in captivity, but in the wild, is quite often the adults' fins will fold over, that sort of floppy fin type thing. So there is actually a couple of examples in the catalogue. One is male number 13, who used to be hanging around with the 12s, actually. And you'll see that he has, for one of his photos, he started with a tall fin and it's just flopped over for whatever reason. But they obviously seem to be able to cope with that. What would happen if the entire fin came off? I don't know. I mean, that would obviously be quite a traumatic injury, but they seem to cope with quite a substantial amount of the fin disappearing and manage okay.
As you say, it is something that we see in other creatures. I know some of the Moray Firth bottlenose dolphins that we also see right down in Northumberland and Yorkshire now have that same kind of floppy fin going on. So it is something that's seen around, isn't it?
Yeah, and you see it. We've seen it in Risso's dolphins as well. I mean, I think for some of them, obviously, the fins get so tall that for whatever reason, they're just not structurally supported after a while. But they seem to continue on as normal.
I know a question people often ask, so I'll pose it to you on their behalf, is, as we're talking about marked fins, what is it that actually causes, the scratches and the chunks to be taken out of the fins on cetaceans?
Well, I think it's a range of different things. I mean, it can be actually caused by sort of other individuals of the same species. So quite often you'll see rake marks. That's the tooth marks on bits of the skin. So you can imagine, whether that's play or whether that's mating behaviour, that can cause damage. It could be another species. There have been scenes, I think, sharks taking bites out of bits of killer whales before. And then, of course, there's obviously the man-made issues. So propellers tend not to react well with cetaceans if they get too close. And sometimes in, I guess, the heat of a kill or something like that, killer whales are, they're maybe not as aware of man-made structures around them when they're trying to go hunting.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, Karen, for answering that one. I'm just going to have another quick look, see if any more questions have come up. They're being added to me. No, I don't have any more questions. Don't know if our team have any more to pass on. Just give it a quick moment. No, that looks like it for questions tonight. Again, thank you very much, Karen, for your participation. I know we're going to see you again tomorrow when we talk about this amazing catalogue.
Yep, you'll be sick of the sight of me.
Absolutely not. It's a pleasure to have you on. And thank you for all of the work you're doing during Orca Watch. I know you're very busy with your work, your proper work, as well as being our regional coordinator. So very much appreciated. Thanks for your time, Karen.
Yeah, no problem. See you tomorrow.
Okay, so let's have a quick look ahead then tomorrow as we bring tonight to a close. As we said, we have this wonderful event looking at the Scottish killer whale photo identification catalogue. A lot of work, huge amount of work gone into producing that catalogue, and a nice history of how that has developed in a very, very similar way to the very, very first one back there around Vancouver Island and British Columbia. So look forward to seeing the chat with all of these and answering the questions at the end. Okay, hope for that nicer weather tomorrow. Hope the visibility is good. Hope the forecast for those light waves turns out to be correct. And we have many more sightings coming in. I'm also keeping my fingers crossed for a few more sightings coming in from today. So we've got a little bit more to talk about there, but we have a busy, busy evening anyway. See you tomorrow.